2, 1. Eric Harless, welcome. How are you doing today? We are live. Oh,
doing well, Stetson. Just getting back from some.
Sorry, I think there's
getting
a little
back
delay
from some
there.
international travel. A little bit. Oh.
I still hear you. Go
I'm getting
ahead.
some delay from you as well. Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
You were frozen on my end for a minute.
I was saying I'm just getting back from some international travel and. Okay. So just getting back from some international travel. Been in Warsaw, Poland, visiting our development teams and doing some partner industry conferences. I was out at our RSA in San Francisco 2 weeks ago. I hear you've been traveling as well, Steph.
Yes, I have. You are frozen on my end, Eric. At least your video is. I still hear you, but I'm just getting back from Japan Friday. We are getting some comments. Yeah, Will, let us know if both of us are coming through. Maybe we'll have to refresh or try again. Will says we're cutting out just a little bit. Maybe it'll recover. And
I'm going to cut my screen. I'll stop my camera resolution a little bit as well.
Okay, right on. You might have a screen share in the background there, Eric, that might be messing with things. But I am jet lagged, man. I've been like trying to catch up, drinking coffee, and trying to get to full brain power. Kind of low. But that said, Eric, we have a topic that I think will be interesting to many folks today about Cove, the importance of recovery validation, and not specifically Cove, because Cove is a enable product that does some backup things. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. So, Cove is backup and recovery solution. But the key thing with backup and recovery is if you're not testing your backups or not testing your recoverability, then it's kind of like Schrodinger's cat, right? You don't know whether it's good or bad. So regardless of whose backup solution you're using, you really need to be testing them. If you're not, you're kind of rolling the dice and waiting till you have a data loss before you find out whether you've got good protection.
For sure. And we're going to get much deeper into this. I'll encourage folks, again, if you are watching on YouTube, drop a comment. We can just display it and kind of field your questions live. Eric, we usually do like a really quick intro. Can you tell us just who you are and what you're up to over at Enable?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So my title here over at Enable is Head Backup Nerd. I've been with the organization now just over 11 years, mixture of product management and this head nerd role. Think outbound product evangelist, community manager, trying to build up, a following or a group of like-minded backup nerds and backup gurus out there that really support a community of healthy backup and healthy recovery.
All right.
As far as the product offering, it's it's a cloud-first backup and recovery solution. Windows, Mac, Linux, full system protection, and granular file folder application database restore.
Awesome, and we'll definitely drop a link to Cove if people want to check that out. But we'll get right into it. I don't need much of an intro. My name's Stetson. I guess run things over at This Is an IT Support Group. But yeah, Eric, getting to this idea of backup recovery validation, I guess it sounds like there's probably this common pattern of just backing things up and assuming your backup is there. Is that kind of the core TLDR here?
It is, yeah. Sadly, most organizations will run their backups and create multiple copies, but they don't go through the due diligence of testing. Even on a semi-regular basis that the data is recoverable, and they get that surprise when they need to start to restore that. Hey, we missed something, or this is not bootable, or a bad patch or a bad driver. So. Most organizations are just not testing. I'd be curious in the audience if we could get some validation from them, or are they testing their backups?
Yeah, please drop again a comment. We can pop it in if you're viewing on YouTube here. But Eric, kind of curious. I mean, it sounds a little bizarre to say out loud, like, oh, people are backing things up, but just again, making these assumptions. I guess what are kind of some common reasons that companies think their backups are valid? Is it just that one reason of like, oh, well, we weren't testing it, or is there others?
Oh, well, yeah, there's definitely lots of reasons here. You could perform a backup, but the selections could be compromised. You thought you were backing up your CD and your E volumes on your main server, but you end up skipping a volume, or you'd renamed a volume and missed it out from a selection. So misconfiguration. It could be media problems. You're doing your backups to external removable media, external hard drives, or to a NAS. That's been compromised or corrupted or ran out of space. You're just not noticing that it's out of capacity or that it's not operating properly. Somebody forgot to set the schedule. New server sprawl, new laptops. You update from Windows 10 to Windows 11 and you never redeploy the backup software on that system. So the active testing does more than just test the restore. It's also validation that you've got the successes there. From a backup perspective. Other points are backups are really complex. It's not just about having certain files in your My Documents directory anymore. It's about having bootable application servers that are going to run after you restore them. So a lot of intricate moving parts. So you might be able to retrieve the data, but you can't make the server bootable, at least not in a short amount of time.
Yeah, so that's definitely a few areas. Maybe folks didn't think about, or maybe I didn't think about it. Is you might think of backups as just being a kind of a binary thing, like it's backed up or not. What's the big deal? And you highlighted a few there. You're not selecting the right thing, or maybe your media is corrupt. Kind of curious on the testing side, and I'm sure we'll get deeper into this. What is a test for recovery validation? Is this just an engineer pulls up some GUI and like stares at it, or what's the kind of depth of that look like?
Well, at a minimum, you should be looking at your backup dashboards or your backup reports and just seeing that you've got, successes or greens or little smiley faces, depending on the application you're using, to know that the backup completed successfully and when the last success was. But that's just a checkbox validation of did it complete or did it run? The act of restoring it is really the only true test. Can I get the data back that I expect, and is it usable? Will the program execute, or can I open the Word document? Things like that. So, assume you've got something simple inside of your organization, like 15 key systems. On a regular basis, you should be restoring those 15 systems to standby hardware, to an offline virtual machine. Going in and picking a selective file, a folder, a directory out of each of those systems and restoring it and checking its integrity, at a bare minimum, once a quarter, maybe worst case once a year. But if you get into larger IT environments, you're going to find that you can't restore everything all the time. So you got to get very selective. So line of business applications, executives, C-level people that can hire or fire, you want to come in and select those systems and periodically restore those. But, one tech that his entire job is doing testing, let's assume he could go through, 3 restores a day across 100 devices. That's everything fully restored once over the course of a month. And when he's done, well, guess what? He doesn't get to take a day off. He gets to start those 100 machines over again and keep going through that regular cycle to know that you've got good restore points from a recent point in time. Most organizations are mandated to do something like this. And that's why I said it's even more shocking that organizations aren't doing the testing. But if you've got cyber insurance liability protection, part of those underwriting guidelines ask, are you doing regular testing of your backups, testing those restores? Now, they don't all outline how frequently you should be doing it or what the test actually looks like. So that opens up a little bit of leeway for you to make those determinations. But a lot of organizations are just not doing it.
Yeah, and as we talk about this more, you obviously highlighted the point. Like maybe for some orgs, it's kind of a balance of what resources we have. Does it? I imagine not everyone is loading every single backup. Maybe in some cases you're making these trade-offs of like let's do like you said, a quarterly or even I guess like a sampling of, let's say you have
Correct.
100 backups. You might you don't need all 100 all the time. But
Correct.
maybe
Yeah.
there's a limit.
If you're spot checking five of your 50 machines, and they all come back successfully, then the next time you do another five and a different five and a different five. Only when you find problems, failure to document changes, errors or loss, would you need to do a more extensive audit. But then again, you might also want to run that by your cybersecurity insurance providers too, to make sure that meets their definition. But you don't necessarily have to work harder. You could also work smarter. There are ways to automate some of this. And that's kind of where we come into play. We'll give you the tools to automate the recoveries so that you only have to focus on the key line of business apps or those executives or the problem machines that maybe the automation couldn't fully validate. And when I say validate, I'm only also talking about being able to restore it as a virtual machine. Give you something that is bootable, and we can get you to a login screen, let you see services and applications starting on the system. So, I'm not testing data integrity any further than I am the ability to boot a virtual machine, which obviously requires a lot of things to all come together.
Gotcha. And I imagine there's methods of validation where you do maybe go deeper into integrity and seeing that, I don't know, you can load data from a database or validate it. I'm not sure. Is that right?
So from an automated perspective, we don't get that deep into it from a restore perspective. Obviously we're trying to preserve data and ensure data encryption and integrity and things like that. So I'm not logging into the machine or interacting with the underlying data under it during the restore processes. But any of those environments that we're building virtual machines for, you can keep that restored system and work with or interact with it. So you could bring it up and go a lot deeper into an actual application or run a database consistency check or send an email or do various things. Yes. Gotcha. So it's not just about having the test, but giving you the environment to do the test without you needing to stand up a whole bunch of hardware and a whole bunch of configurations.
Gotcha. Awesome.
And I've got
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I think we don't need to sell anybody on backing up their data and probably not on validating their data. I was just curious if you had any examples from folks you've talked to or seen in the field or just what maybe some of the biggest risks are if folks aren't testing their backups regularly.
So yes. So interestingly enough, patching has been something I've seen problematic in the past. So assuming that you're doing a regular, once a month patch cycle, you're going through and applying service packs and drivers and updates to systems. And then, normally those machines are, sitting there waiting for their next reboot for those updates to be applied. It's probably been about a year and a half or so now since Microsoft did a major driver update that bricked systems, and people had to go in and roll back functionality from them. So something like recovery testing or boot testing, if you do it frequently enough, it can actually simulate that reboot cycle so that we'll run a backup of a pending update status, and then we'll go to do the recovery test, and we'll realize, hey, none of these systems are booting up during the recovery test. That tells me two things. One is I don't want to shut down any of my production systems or cycle the power on those just yet. And I want to go figure out in my test lab environment where I was doing the recoveries, what's broken. Is it a patch and update, something I need to revert? And I don't have to worry about reverting it in my test environment. I have to worry about reverting it on my production systems so that I can properly shut them down and restart them. The CrowdStrike event that we had here not that long ago, sounds like it might be kind of an environment like that, although that was one where the changes were happening at such a low kernel level that even recovery testing, probably would not have. Recovery testing might have caught the change, but it wouldn't have been able to undo the process. But that kind of scenario. Other pieces. Viruses. You get hit with a ransomware or crypto of some sort. You can see that inside of the recovery test environments, and know that yes, there's been a change or a problem, and choose to roll back or test an earlier point in time. So I want to test 3 days before I think the ransomware may have been impacted. Get that environment to boot up, kind of a sandbox environment, and understand yes, that's a known good point or a functional point, and then to use that as my basis for recovery. So it gives you some good analytics as to what might be a good restore point.
Gotcha. So the classic advice: back up, and of course validate, as we're talking about today.
Yeah, it's just a great way to see issues earlier, before you do mass reboots across your systems and things like that. Peace of mind too. Going in and seeing a full UI or a full console full of booted screenshots from a particular day or particular point in time of your systems. It gives you the peace of mind that yes, if I were to shut this machine down right now and just power it off and power it back on, would it come up? Other than hoping that yes, I had a good backup that might get me back up and running. Other advantages I've seen, estimates. So people often wonder, well, how long would it take me to restore this particular system in the event of a total loss, hardware failure? Virtualizing and doing recovery testing gives you that exact test. So you could see if we needed to restore this into a public cloud, an Azure environment, onto a standby hypervisor, how long would it take to actually rebuild that virtual machine from scratch? So some really good metrics there.
Got it. Awesome.
I'm not sure if we want to try the screen share again or not, but
yeah, let's do it. I think
I've got
I think we're hitting a little.
A couple examples.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it. I was just gonna say I think there's a little bit of a delay, and it's making like our conversation a little weird, but we'll roll with the punches.
Sorry about that.
No, all good.
I'll kill my cam. Maybe that'll save some bandwidth, and we'll try share screen. You might need to push that into production for me there, but I think that'll bring up a Cove console.
Yes. What are we looking at?
So for ignore, forget brands aside here. We're looking at a backup console.
Eric, I think you're cutting out pretty bad for me. Can you still hear me?
Servers and workstations that are protected, showing success over time. So we can see that.
I think we just lost.
Yeah, I think screen sharing is going to be out of the question today.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's pretty.
Yeah,
light.
I think screen sharing is going to be out of the question today.
That's all right.
Okay, so we'll skip that approach. The point being that you can see a nice color bar of successes and failures, and then dig into that and see a series of successes and failures around restores. Look at services that are starting in addition to just login screens. But just having a login screen, while it's nice, it's a good peace of mind. If you've got dozens or hundreds of systems, going through and just checking that login screen for success can also be cumbersome. It's a daily or weekly activity you've got to go through and perform. So we've taken some initiatives here recently to introduce some AI and machine learning into it. If the AI engine can determine if it's a valid login screen versus a Windows patch or Windows update screen or a blue screen of death on login, that's going to make your confidence in the success of that recovery a lot better. So what we did is we went out and fed in around 70,000 or so different boot screenshots, from Windows 7 up through Windows 11, 2008 through 2025, and all different Windows OS editions, and classified those. Is this a successful login? Is it a good boot screen? Is it an OEM edition? Is it a headless Windows core installation? Is it a Hyper-V core installation? Those kind of things, so that we could really determine, is it a valid login screen, or is it a pending update screen, or some failed driver screen in between, so that that just that 1% error of saying yes, it was successful, or no, it was not, could lead you to question whether things are valid, and make you have to go in and look at all of your screenshots, every day or every week. So we've had some really, really good success with that. Just feeding the AI engine and determining, is it a valid restore or not.
Yeah, that's incredibly interesting. I'd never thought of in that manner, just feeding a screenshots of the boot screen to whatever system and having it check if it's valid. It sure beats, I guess, having an engineer do it. It frees up some time to put those resources elsewhere.
Yeah, the key thing here is, you want your tech to go through and identify the one or two machines that had some problems that might need a little bit more extensive, manual testing, or a sample restore into their environment. I talked about doing these, and where you restore them is kind of up to you. If you've got your own hypervisors, that's great. Hyper-V and VMware are probably the two greatest equalizers or enablers for recovery testing, because you don't need one-to-one like hardware. You don't need to have a hot standby site. You can just virtualize whatever it is that you are protecting, build a sample restore. Sometimes you even only need the boot volume. If you think about that, a humongous server, a 1 terabyte boot volume, and a 20 terabyte data volume sitting behind it. You really don't need to restore all 21 terabytes to validate the bootability or the recoverability of that system. If you just restore the C volume and you get it to boot up, that's going to show integrity of the system. It's going to show reliability of the backup session that you have. So you combine that bootable C volume with your backup logs of the data volume, and you can get to a fairly comparable chance of success or chance of recovery. So, cost savings, configuration, less configuration needs. I don't need to transfer 20 terabytes across the wire in order to determine, yes, it can be restored.
Got it. Very cool. We might have alluded to this a little bit earlier, Eric, but I'm kind of curious for any org that has no testing in place today or backup recovery validation. What's kind of low-hanging fruit, or what kind of plan should they put together to kind of implement this?
So the frequency of it is one of the places you'd start. If you're bound by any particular legal requirements or industry requirements to do testing on a regular schedule, start there. Pick your key systems, line of business applications, executives, laptops, things of that nature, and look at your infrastructure. See if you've got a spare hypervisor that you can provision for this purpose. And it's as simple as grabbing your backup software, whoever's it is, and doing a sample restore back into that infrastructure. So that's your baseline. And then just cycle through those systems, week after week, month after month, and checking off those systems. And then when you get to the end of the list, you start over again. But if you are using something like Cove, it's quite a bit simpler. It's a checkbox to say, I want to test this on a bi-weekly or a monthly basis. You tick the boxes, you provide some authorization, and we'll actually go out and restore that data into our cloud in a regional data center that we manage in the same country or region that your data is being stored in. And we'll boot it in an isolated network, screenshot it, power it down, purge the VM, and then send you a report. so that way you can see exactly the success. So very, very little effort there. Ideally, whoever you're using from a vendor perspective, they're going to have some kind of sandboxing or physical to virtual type of restore capabilities that can be used to do this DR testing, whether it's automated or manual. Typically, the automated, you're going to have a little bit more of a surcharge to them, but time is money. So, if your tech is spending it all doing restores, it may not be a cost savings.
Gotcha. Very interesting. I wish we had we could share a screen, but maybe we'll save that for a future session. Just kind of thinking a little bit more. I know you talked a bit about some of the capabilities with AI, where you have these boot screenshots and things like that. Are there any other advancements in that kind of area where we're seeing AI automating away, having to think about any aspect of backup? There
is some work being done. This is obviously forward-looking statements here, but obviously we're continuing to look at where we can implement AI into the data protection space, and using it to mitigate risk, to do things like anomaly detection, or to link that to like honeypots and configuration changes, spikes in data transfer. Those kind of queries are things that we're looking at, just to make sure that if the bad actor were to get into the environment, would they be able to damage the backups, and could we identify that very, very quickly in order to shut them down or lock them out. It's great to have immutability, but you obviously don't want bad actors with free range to your environments, or hopping on the end customers or the endpoint systems and trying to damage the backup operations. Other things that you might think about from an AI perspective, I've been asked about like AI selections and AI configurations and AI monitoring. That's probably a better space for kind of left of boom, when you've got a security tool, an MDR, an XDR, things like that. They're going to have the AI components in place to help ensure that you don't get compromised. But then if you do, having that backup in place, with its immutability features, is kind of your last line of defense. So at that point, you just want to make sure you've got a good copy someplace you can restore from.
Awesome. And thinking a little bit from, I guess, the MSP angle, could you talk about a little, this question sounds a little bit stupid, of like, what's the value of backups? Because it's extremely, extremely high. But thinking about, I guess, specifically our conversation on testing, how can MSPs maybe, communicate that to their clients, or I guess kind of implement a little bit of what we talked about today?
So I'm harping on the whole cyber insurance thing a little bit.
Sure.
I see more and more MSPs that are being asked to fill out those surveys, those questionnaires by their customers, and it's there in black and white in most of these applications. Are you doing regular testing? Are your backups immutable? It's really not even an option to not have a backup of your systems. You might say, oh, well, I've got really good security on the front end, or left of boom. But, if a bad actor gets in and even compromises one or two systems, are you prepared to rebuild or recreate, or can you rebuild or create that information? So, the cyber insurance policy question just kind of opens up a whole new checklist of services that the MSP could potentially come in and provide. So, start with something that, is going to do the backups. It's going to get them off site. That's going to be a second question in that survey is your data stored off site? A lot of folks are familiar with that 3-2-1 backup methodology. 3 copies of your data, 2 different types of media, at least 1 copy off site. While a fairly basic strategy, it still plays rather nicely. So if you can meet those criteria, your likelihood of recovery in event of, site loss, hardware failure, total ransomware is still pretty good, because you've got immutable offsite copies. Just follow that lead. Find out what the requirements are. Find out what their industry requires, and build a backup strategy in place for that. It shouldn't be an option. Realistically, it should be a standard boilerplate piece right alongside, base antivirus or an MDR, XDR type of EDR solution, right up there with patch. If you don't have it, they're just going to be knocking on your door asking why not later.
For sure, and that's why as we have this conversation, it's as I have questions that come up, it's such backup is such a fundamental thing, and it's like, well, obviously, yeah. But Eric, I do want to take a moment. We got a comment from Murali Venkat, a little bit vague, a little nuance here, but he says backup in a multi-cloud environment. I guess any comments on maybe how you might back things up in multi-cloud.
Yeah, so we support on-premise backup and recovery. When you're hosting your own infrastructure, if you're running virtual machines in an Azure or AWS or Google or some other third-party cloud environment, or even a data center or a colo, we're going to run the software inside of the guest operating system so that we can capture that. The advantage of doing that is I just see it like it's a Windows server or a Linux box or a Mac, and I can restore that to alternate hardware, so dissimilar hardware restores, or into a hypervisor someplace else. So I can take you from an Azure virtual machine into local Hyper-V or into another platform. So that advantage is really, really nice. Just pure backup and restore. When I'm doing my recovery testing, most of that, if we're hosting it on our systems, we restore it back into a Hyper-V environment, regardless of where it came from originally. If you want to do your own restores and your own hosting, which we allow you those services as well, what we call standby image, then you can go from Hyper-V into VMware, VMware into Azure, and so on, or just build flat VHD and VMDK files. So yeah, multi-cloud support, not really a problem as far as the protection or the testing aspect of it. If you're trying to restore back into those clouds, depending on the cloud, you might look at a combination of offsite backup and local snapshotting technology. I really like combining the two together. Use one to get that offsite copy, and then use a different snapshotting or checkpointing technology inside of the cloud provider to do local checkpoints that you can use for rapid rollback.
Right on. Hopefully that's helpful, Murali Venkat. Thanks for commenting. Yeah, my advice would be just back them all up to each other. It'll be fine. Eric, one thing I wanted to highlight as we talked or ask about it, because I think this phrase isn't known by everybody. Oh, sorry, okay. I'm so slow today. Still getting I'm operating at half capacity in jet lag. But you mentioned left of boom. So this is a little bit off topic on backups, but what is a boom and what is this left of boom phrase? And
okay. About? So this is an area that I am still learning a lot about. For forever now, we've considered backup the last line of defense. When you're hit by a cyber attack or by a hardware failure, right? It's your, if all else fails, go to the backups. But data protection software is part of the security stack, multi-layered security model. So left of boom, right of boom is really going to refer to boom being the attack or the failure or the compromise. Left of boom are going to be all of the actions you're taking to prevent the failures and the bad actors from getting into your environment. So your patch, your AV, your employee training around phishing and so on. And at some point, if a bad actor does get in, that's your boom event, whether it's one server or system compromised or lateral movement that compromises multiple devices in your environment. And then right of boom is going to be all of the actions you take post compromise, whether that's using an EDR solution to do rollback capabilities on premise, or you revert to your backup software and other remediation steps, or standing up a secondary site or a test environment, a sandbox environment in order to perform your restores. I just got back from that's been about 2.5 weeks ago now, but we were out at our RSA conference in San Francisco. We acquired a cybersecurity company, November of last year, Adlumin. So Cove and Adlumin play very nicely together. Adlumin left of Boom, and then Cove right of Boom. So obviously their goal is to stop the bad actors, but you have to detect the actions, and if something were to get through, ensuring that Cove's got good copies of the data to restore, really simplifies getting back to business.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for going over that, because I myself have heard of the conference Right of Boom, but I don't work specifically in cybersecurity, but I'm texting a few like cybersec friends like, hey, what is this thing all about? And of course,
you'd be surprised. I bet that most of what you do ties back to cybersecurity. I think we all work for cybersecurity these days.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point. It's kind of one of those things that's everybody's responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, Eric, what else? Man, we talked about so much and so little. I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface on both backup and recovery validation.
Yeah, it's a really, it's a really bland topic when you talk about backup. The recovery side of the house is where it starts to get a little bit sexy, especially when you need to get the data back. So being able to see the restored systems, to be able to hand a screenshot to the CEO or the owner showing that proof of validation or proof of life can be a very, very good selling point for an MSP services. If as an MSP you're getting asked, what have you done for me lately? Using those recurring screenshots that are being generated, providing that as a executive summary report or a validation report of what you're doing for the client, can go a long way. Otherwise, it's just looking at green dashboard saying, yes, we had backups. We backed up so many petabytes of data, and we, did it within this time frame. It's those screenshots and that boot samples that really bring the excitement. What else am I missing here?
Yeah, of course.
I think I've hit most of it, but it's a topic I can talk to. I can make somebody's ears bleed. So
yeah, I think eventually, Eric, we should do some sort of demo of Cove, because I think folks would be interested to see a little bit more. Of course, what we've talked about just at the surface level here is applicable to whatever system you're using. But could you just give us like an elevator pitch a little bit? Like, what is Cove? We know it does some backup stuff, but what types of systems can you back up with this? Again, is this for your Mac,
Sure.
cloud? Where does it work? And what?
Sure. So, Cove's considered a cloud-first backup and recovery solution. It is multi-tenant. So you're going to log into a web-based multi-tenant console. Backup.management is the URL. And you're going to see your customer tenant structure. So your different service organizations, end customers, and their various sites broken out by geo. We're talking 27 different data centers in 17 countries on 4 continents. So full global support with the ability to secure your data within data centers within country or within region. Windows, Mac, and Linux protection. We're going to back up the data at a file, or actually at a sub-file level. So I can do variable byte level deduplication. That translates to more frequent backups and sending less data across the WAN. So even organizations with very, very limited bandwidth or upload capabilities, we can still get daily backups, or in some cases every 4 hours, or even hourly backups offsite. It's going to be a lot more efficient than image-based solutions, where you're capturing full disk images or delta disk images. I'll transfer maybe 1/10 of the data that they transfer on a daily basis. Same can be said for comparing us to appliance-based backup solutions. You don't need to install hardware on premise. You don't have to roll out a technician. Simple script-based agent deployment. You could deploy, have this running on 100 servers or 1,000 servers within a few minutes using your RMM or small PowerShell script or Active Directory installation. Let's see. Very, very, like I said, low footprint from a bandwidth perspective. That means you can keep more backup copies in the cloud. And then the real value advantage here is that we don't charge you a per gigabyte used capacity in the cloud. It's flat license-based protection per server, per workstation, per virtual machine. That includes all of your retention, all of your cloud storage. So we're not nickeling and diming you for every gig of data that goes to the cloud.
All right, right on. And if folks want to learn more about either backup or Cove, any plug for where they can go, or can they reach out?
Probably the easiest place would be just enable.com. That's in-able.com. And you can take a look at all of the Enable products there. As I said, deploy from your RMM, so Cove will work just as easily with any of the third-party competitive RMMs out there as it will with our own Enable RMMs.
Okay, right on. And maybe maybe we could field a question. Actually, we got one right before we were about to close up here, but from Hanishri, I think it is. What compliance or regulatory concerns might make an organization hesitate to adopt public cloud BDR, and how can those be mitigated?
Oh, well, when looking at solutions, you're going to want to make sure that they are using encryption. They're sending data over TLS 1.2 or 1.3 tunnels. There is the race for CMMC certification and FedRAMP and things like that. Those are areas we are actively developing toward as well. So all of those could make organizations, wary of looking at the cloud. However, when I say cloud and I talk about utilizing enabled data centers, those are not necessarily public cloud environments. Those are private cloud or private data center instances that we manage throughout the world. And then we do allow you to recover into your own private data centers or your own customer environments as well. So it could be your customer's Azure instance. It could be your MSP Azure instance. It could be a Hyper-V or a VMware server sitting on premise at the customer's secondary or tertiary site, or at the MSP's private colo. We're not forcing you into a true public cloud environment. It can be fairly well isolated, but it gives you a lot of controls. And I'm not pushing you into a vendor cloud necessarily either. I consider the ability to restore into Azure a lot more flexible than going into a vendor BDR cloud, because if you can go into Azure, you can go into the customer's Azure environment. They may have already considered hybrid Azure AD or intra-ID integrations. They might be running a mixture of on-prem and cloud resources. You could even use Cove to do the quote accidental migration. We've seen customers do this where they failed over into Azure and just decided to keep those resources there because it was quicker, it was easier, it was cheaper, and they didn't want to go and find the budget to replace that hardware they had lost on premise. You figure you've got a hurricane barreling down on you, and you need a place to run these resources, temporarily while you're in the path of that cone or that funnel. Spinning it up inside of Azure in your own customer's instance makes a lot of sense. They can continue to use it, let it sit there in a standby state, and then if they don't need to fail over, you just purge it and throw it away. So, a lot of these cases, it's the customer's public cloud security, not ours.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers the question there.
Yeah. We were a bit desperate for some engagement, so I'm glad we fielded that one here.
That's all good. I do have partners that are doing just that. They'll spin these environments up. They'll take the test and then do prove validation, but then they'll just flip it over into standby mode. Basically, keeping these VMs persistent in the cloud, waiting to be booted. And if they're not needed, they can throw them away. But if they are needed, then it's just a matter of 5 to 15 minutes, the time it takes to start a virtual machine and configure a VPN to get access to that cloud instance.
All right, right on. Eric, it is always a pleasure chatting with you and the folks over at Enable. We'll give another plug for in-able.com. I also know that there is enable.com/events. I'm going to drop a link to office hours on Cove Data Protection. I see you have a few coming up. I think these are like all the others that are free and kind of anybody can join. There is
correct. Yeah, events
tons,
going to give you is going to give you access to the 7 head nerds that we have, both on our RMM, our security, our Mac, our sales and marketing, and our newly hired Microsoft head nerd. So I've got a head nerd focusing on Microsoft technologies as well. You'll also get access to all of our boot camps and training. And then each nerd does a monthly office hours session, which is just a open forum to come ask questions. And you don't need to be an Enable customer to participate in these.
Okay, right on. We'll encourage that for folks. Lots and lots and lots of info. Free education here. Can't beat it. But otherwise, Eric, super appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks,
We'll see you
Edson.
on the
Take care,
next
guys.
one. All right, later.